Ma'am, I just need you to pause right here.
I'm not causing a scene. I'm leaving.
I understand. There was a call about a disturbance.
A disturbance? Or someone uncomfortable I didn't disappear?
No one's saying that. I just need to be clear on what's happening.
What's happening is I lost everything.
The camera doesn't blink. At 2:14 a.m., fluorescent light spills across a hospital corridor as a woman signs another consent form she won't read twice. For 3 years, she has been here holding a hand, learning the language of machines, absorbing the quiet math of sacrifice. When he dies, the promise he left behind is simple and devastating: $2.5 million. The betrayal that follows is cleaner than blood. It happens on paper, and it's all on CCTV. If you care about how power really moves through signatures, silences, and institutions that pretend neutrality, stay with this story. Watch how care becomes currency, how grief becomes leverage, and how the truth survives only when someone refuses to look away. The hallway smelled like antiseptic and burnt coffee, the kind that sat on a warmer too long because no one had time to notice. The CCTV camera above the nurse's station caught her every night at roughly the same hour, 9:47 p.m. Shoulders slightly hunched, tote bag pressed against her side, eyes already tired before she reached the room. The timestamp mattered later. Everything would matter later. For now, it was just routine. She had learned the hospital's rhythms the way some people learn a language. Shift change at 7. Vitals at 9. The soft knock before a nurse entered. The harder knock when it was a doctor who didn't want to be interrupted. She knew which alarms meant danger and which meant inconvenience. She knew how to silence the beeping without silencing the patient. For 3 years, she had been here more than she had been anywhere else. More than home, more than work, more than sleep. He lay in bed with the kind of stillness that came from long illness, not peace. Tubes ran where veins had once been enough. The oxygen machine breathed when he couldn't. She adjusted his blanket, careful not to tie the 4-line taped too tightly to his arm. A nurse watched from the doorway, making a note on a clipboard. In the medical record, it would say caregiver, present. In reality, it meant something else entirely. Any pain? The nurse asked. He shook his head once. Small movement. Expensive movement. Everything about illness was expensive. She answered anyway. He was uncomfortable earlier. Around 6, the nurse nodded, typed it into the system. Time-stamped. Logged, real. This was how she existed now, between human concern and institutional record. She signed consent forms without drama, her handwriting steady even when her hands weren't. She learned which medications required double verification, which procedures needed family approval. She learned, quietly, that she wasn't family. Not on paper. His family visited too, less often. They arrived clean, organized, with the posture of people who believed the system would work for them because it always had. His older brother shook hands with doctors, asked precise questions, took notes. His mother stood near the window, arms folded, eyes on the parking lot instead of the bed. "Thank you for being here," the brother said once. The words were polite, finished. He didn't ask how long she'd been staying. He didn't need to. The CCTV would show it. There were moments small, almost invisible, when the balance shifted. A look exchanged over the bed. A pause before answering a question. When the doctor asked who would be making decisions if things deteriorated, the brother answered too quickly. The chart was adjusted, the hierarchy restored. At 2:14 a.m., the camera outside room 317 recorded her stepping into the hallway to sign another form. Do not resuscitate. The doctor explained it carefully, legally. She listened, nodded, signed where indicated. The pen clicked. The sound echoed more than it should have. Inside the room, the machines continued their work. She held his hand. He squeezed once, weak but intentional. "You'll be okay," he said. His voice barely made it past the oxygen mask. She didn't answer. She didn't correct him. She had learned that reassurance was sometimes a lie people needed to tell themselves. Later, much later, people would argue about motives. About money, about whether care given without a contract counted for anything at all. But in these hours, none of that existed yet. There was only the visual. The steady choice to stay. The quiet accumulation of moments no one else bothered to count. Down the hall, a man in a suit waited by the elevator, checking his phone. A lawyer's card rested in his pocket, edges sharp and unused. He didn't approach. Not yet. The camera caught him anyway. Silence settled back into the corridor. The kind that feels temporary, even when it isn't. The promise didn't arrive with drama. It arrived as a sentence spoken softly, as if volume could change consequence. He said it on a Tuesday afternoon, while rain streaked the window. and the hospital television played a muted game no one watched. The CCTV camera in the corner caught only the back of her head as she leaned closer to hear him. "I took care of it," he said. "You won't be left with nothing." She didn't ask for clarification. In 3 years, she had learned the danger of interrupting fragile moments with practical questions. His breathing was shallow, measured by a machine that clicked each second like a metronome. She squeezed his hand, a silent acknowledgement that meant gratitude, not expectation. He died 6 days later, 6:38 a.m. The time was pronounced, documented, signed. A nurse confirmed absence of pulse. A doctor confirmed absence of response. The room emptied faster than it should have. By 7:10, the bed was already being stripped. At 7:22, security footage showed her standing alone in the hallway, holding a paper bag with his personal effects wallet, phone, watch items that suddenly belonged to no one. The first mention of the money came in the administrative office, not the funeral home. A hospital social worker slid a brochure across the desk explaining next steps: grief counseling, estate inquiries. "If there's a will," she said, gently, like she was talking about whether there was a will, or something close enough to pass for one until it didn't. Probate procedure is designed to look neutral. In most counties, filings must be submitted within a specific window, 30 days, sometimes 60, depending on jurisdiction. Notices are mailed. Hearings are scheduled. Everything is orderly. Everything is quiet. The first filing named his brother as executor. The second referenced a handwritten amendment notarized, dated 8 months earlier. Her name appeared once. Beneath it, a number, $2,500,000. She saw the document for the first time on a scanned PDF forwarded without commentary. The handwriting was unmistakable. The signature, too. The notary stamp looked legitimate. Commission number, expiration date. It felt real in the way paper feels real when you believe in it. CCTV footage from the courthouse captured her walking through security alone. No lawyer beside her. She carried a folder pressed to her chest, as if proximity could keep it safe. At the clerk's window, she spoke carefully, asked how to file an appearance. The clerk's tone was neutral, practiced. "Are you family?" the clerk asked. "No," she said. Then, after a beat, "I was his caregiver." The word hung there, insufficient. The first hearing lasted 7 minutes. No arguments, just scheduling. The brother's attorney requested additional time to verify authenticity. The judge granted it without looking up. Procedural fairness at work. She nodded like she understood. Outside, she checked her phone. 3 missed calls from an unfamiliar number. A voicemail followed. "This is counsel for the estate," the voice said. "We should talk." They talked 2 days later in a conference room with frosted glass walls. The attorney smiled professionally, explained concerns without accusation. The notary might have been out of state that day. The witness signature was unclear. The amendment wasn't properly integrated into the original will. "Things happen," he said. "We just want clarity." Clarity felt like erasure. On camera later that afternoon, she returned his apartment keys to building management, signed a release, emptied the mailbox. The locks would be changed by morning. Possession, the law said, had transferred. That night, alone, she replayed his sentence in her head. "I took care of it." It had sounded final, settled. Now it sounded like a mistake. The promise was real. The paper existed, but paper, she was beginning to understand, only mattered when the right people wanted it to. The first motion arrived by certified mail, heavy with implication and thin on explanation. A request to delay, a request to examine, a request to question the circumstances under which the amendment had been written. Each line was careful, polite, legally clean. No accusations, just doubt codified. CCTV from the courthouse captured the pattern before she recognized it herself. The brother arrived early, always with counsel. She arrived on time, sometimes late, sometimes breathless, carrying the same folder that had begun to fray at the corners. The security guard nodded at him by name. To her, he asked for ID every time. Procedure, neutral, logged. Inside the courtroom, power spoke softly. The brother's attorney stood when he spoke. She remained seated unless addressed directly. When she did speak, it was brief, respectful, restrained. Judges prefer restraint. It reads as credibility. The challenge wasn't framed as hostility. It was framed as responsibility. The estate had a duty, they said, to protect rightful heirs. The language mattered. Rightful. Not moral. Not relational. Legal. They filed an emergency motion questioning undue influence. The phrase sounded clinical, academic. In practice, it suggested something darker, that care could become coercion, that devotion could become manipulation if it lasted long enough. The filing cited case law from prior decades, jurisdictions where caregivers had overstepped, where affection had blurred into advantage. None of the cases were identical. They didn't need to be. They just needed to exist. Her lawyer court-appointed at first, then retained through loans. She didn't talk about responded point by point. Hospital visitation logs, pharmacy receipts, employment records showing reduced hours. Evidence of consistency, not opportunism. He included a nurse's affidavit describing her presence during critical decisions, another from a social worker who noted no signs of isolation or pressure. The estate replied with a continuance request. Time became the weapon. Each delay cost money. Filing fees, transcript costs, expert consultations to verify handwriting, engage paper stock. The brothers' legal team paid without hesitation. She rationed. She stopped therapy. She sold her car. Dialogue in the hallway stayed civil. It was always civil. "I'm sorry it's come to this," the brother said once. Not meeting her eyes, she nodded. "Me too." What he didn't say mattered more. He didn't say thank you. He didn't say she stayed when we didn't. Silence filled the space where acknowledgement might have lived. A hearing date was set, then moved. The reason cited was docket congestion, real enough to be unchallengeable. The judge suggested mediation, voluntary, non-binding, reasonable. In mediation, the estate's opening position was simple: a settlement below the promised amount, conditioned on a non-disclosure agreement. Closure, they called it. Peace. She asked one question: why? The mediator didn't answer. He adjusted his glasses, wrote something down. CCTV captured her leaving early, standing alone by the elevator, breathing through her nose the way people do when they're trying not to cry in public. The camera recorded the moment she straightened her shoulders, wiped her face, and pressed the button again. That night, a new filing appeared on the docket. A motion to seal certain exhibits, privacy concerns, reputational harm, inheritance. She realized wasn't just about money. It was about control over the narrative. Who got to define love after death? Who got to decide whether care counted? The hearing was finally scheduled 6 weeks out. Long enough for preparation, long enough for pressure to work. When the notice arrived, she read it twice. The date, the time, the courtroom number. It felt less like a chance and more like a test. She closed the folder, set it on the table, and stared at it until the room went quiet. The cost announced itself quietly, the way most damage does. Not as a threat, not as a warning, just an invoice with a due date that didn't care how tired she was. Expert witness retainer, additional filing fee, courier service for sealed exhibits. Each line item was small enough to ignore once. Together, they became a narrowing corridor. CCTV from her apartment lobby showed her checking the mail twice a day now, morning and night. Habit born of anxiety. She sorted envelopes on the hood of her car because it felt safer to read bad news outside than let it sit inside her home. One letter confirmed the hearing. Another explained that her temporary counsel would be stepping back unless additional funds were secured. Professional, regretful, final. Inside the system, resistance has rules. She learned them fast. She filed a request for fee waivers, supported by income statements and medical bills from years prior. The clerk accepted the forms without comment. The judge granted some, denied others. Neutrality again. Always neutrality. Pressure arrived from angles that never quite crossed a line. A call from a private number that hung up when she answered. A subpoena request for her personal messages denied, then refiled with narrower scope. The estate's attorney never raised his voice. He didn't need to. His calm was a signal: we can do this as long as it takes. Dialogue grew thinner, sharper. "You understand this is routine," he said during a brief hallway exchange. "I understand," she replied. What she didn't say was that routine can still ruin people. The motion to seal exhibits was granted in part. CCTV footage from the hospital would be admissible, but only under protective order. No copies. No public release. The camera could speak, but only in a whisper. She sat through depositions where her care was parsed like a transaction. Why did she stay overnight so often? Why did she manage his medications? Why had she accompanied him to legal appointments? Each answer risked sounding like motive. Each denial risked sounding evasive. The questions were framed politely, methodically, designed to exhaust rather than expose. A nurse testified remotely, her face pixelated on a screen. She spoke plainly about presence, about patterns, about who was there when decisions had to be made quickly. The estate objected to relevance, overruled, briefly. Then something shifted, not dramatically, not heroically. A hospital administrator submitted an affidavit correcting a timeline error in the estate's filing. The notary's commission number matched hospital records from that day. A witness, a junior staffer who had nothing to gain, confirmed being present when the amendment was signed. "Tired of being careful," she said. "Tired of watching the truth bend." The estate requested another continuance. Denied. The hearing arrived without fanfare. Courtroom B, wooden benches. Fluorescent lights that made everyone look older. The judge listened more than he spoke. When he did, it was to ask for precision. Dates, names, procedures. CCTV footage played silently as part of the record. There she was, night after night, time-stamped into existence. Care, rendered undeniable not by emotion but by repetition. In a break, his mother sat 3 rows behind her. They didn't speak. They didn't look at each other. Silence did the work words couldn't. When the judge adjourned for the day, no ruling was issued. The weight of waiting returned, heavier now because hope had been reintroduced outside. Dusk settled over the steps. She stood still, absorbing the quiet, knowing that truth had a cost, and she had already paid most of it. The ruling didn't come with ceremony. No gavel slam. No speech about justice. It arrived as a written order uploaded to a docket at 8:03 a.m. Stamped, signed, unemotional. CCTV from the courthouse showed her standing at a public terminal, refreshing the page, watching her own future load line by line. The judge found the amendment valid. Not heroic language, not vindication. Just sufficiency. The notary's commission were active. The witness credible. The claim of undue influence unsupported by evidence. The estate's objections were noted and rejected. The brother's attorney read the order twice, lips pressed together, already calculating next steps. Appeal windows, settlement leverage, damage control. The system didn't stop because truth had surfaced, it simply adjusted around it. Outside the courtroom, the hallway felt smaller. Sound flattened. A clerk nodded as she passed, recognition finally replacing procedure. It was subtle, but it mattered. For 3 years, she had existed in the margins of institutions that required proof before acknowledgement. Now the record reflected what the cameras had always known. But victory, if it could be called that, didn't feel like relief. It felt like release from holding her breath for too long. Her shoulders dropped. Her hands shook. Exhaustion moved in where adrenaline had lived. The estate requested mediation again. This time, the offer matched the promise minus fees, minus costs, minus time. The number looked smaller than it should have, drained by process. She accepted without comment. Closure, finally, without conditions. A non-disclosure agreement sat on the table. She crossed out one paragraph, initialed the change. The attorney hesitated, then nodded. The cameras wouldn't record this part. They never did. Weeks later, a policy memo circulated through the hospital network. Caregiver documentation protocols updated. Expanded definitions. Clearer witness requirements for bedside legal actions. No one named her. No one needed to. Systems rarely apologize, they adapt. CCTV from the hospital corridor was archived, flagged for training use. A case study in presence. In pattern recognition. In how truth sometimes survives only because machines don't forget when people do. She returned once months later, to retrieve a file mistakenly left behind. The hallway looked the same. Different patients, different grief. The camera caught her pausing outside room 317, then walking on. Some doors don't need to be opened again. The money arrived quietly, no announcement, no letter of condolence, just a transfer confirmation with a reference number and a date. It didn't feel like inheritance. It felt like compensation for time that could never be returned. She paid debts first, then she rested. In the end, the cameras remembered what people tried to reframe. They remembered consistency. They remembered silence that stayed. They remember care, rendered without witnesses, and then, finally, with them. Justice didn't feel like victory. It felt like exhaustion.